My name is Clint Crookshanks. I work for the National Transportation Safety Board. On February 1st, 2003, I was at home when my brother-in-law called me to tell me that the Columbia accident had happened, and I immediately called the NTSB Communications Center to see if I was going to be going to the accident. I've worked for the NTSB for about 10 years. Prior to the NTSB, I was building winglets for 727s, and prior to that, I was working for Boeing in Seattle.
My name is Robert Bezon. I recently retired from the NTSB, and on February in 2003, I was out doing some yard work, got a phone call concerning the accident, and was told to stand by for further instructions. And later on, we ended up traveling. I flew C-47s in Vietnam and KC-135s for another 10 years or so. I joined the NTSB and have been doing that for 27 years. When we first signed on for this assignment, we understood that it would be a very chaotic situation at first, just like aircraft accidents are. In fact, some of the NASA personnel had actually visited us on our accident sites for training purposes. And now, unfortunately, it was their turn to do their stuff, and we were there to assist, to advise, and we hope we helped out a bit. Clint, you must have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we launched down to Barksdale in Louisiana, and that's where we first had contact with any of the mishap investigation folks from NASA, and it was really kind of a difficult situation for them to begin with, having lost this one vehicle. And I got the impression that they weren't expecting it. Well, I knew they weren't expecting it, but they didn't really know what to do with an accident.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think, fortunately, NASA doesn't have that many catastrophic accidents in shuttles or otherwise. And I think it seemed like their planning and everything was more geared toward launch accidents or perhaps accidents of a more industrial nature, a fuel fire somewhere or something like that. And I sense that they were a bit overwhelmed, which is natural. And we ended up having half a dozen folks down there, I think, right off the bat. Yeah. And, well, I kind of felt like a fifth wheel. There were so many people searching down there that I didn't feel like we were contributing that much to the search effort itself.
Yeah, initially I think that's exactly right. We were trying to advise them and trying to tell them how we would conduct an accident investigation, but then didn't really feel like they were taking our advice initially, and there was a lot of inertia to get going. We had a huge site, a site much larger than any site that we've ever seen. Yeah. 300 miles by 4 miles is just enormous, and trying to manage that site, I think, was very difficult for them.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, the main wreckage pattern was from Fort Worth to Fort Polk in 2 different states. We've done large accidents, Lockerbie, where it's been a couple, maybe 100-mile wide swath, TWA 800, where it was a half a mile perhaps, but this was a huge effort. And when, fortunately, FEMA stepped up within a few days and started to take a bit of control to the search effort itself. Now, regarding the overall organization, it was difficult, of course. We had NASA and eventually the CAIB had a contingent at Barksdale, and I think there was some original thoughts of actually doing the reconstruction there, but wiser heads prevailed. They had a contingent down in Texas, and then of course the NASA folks back at KSC. So and this was 10 years ago, so cell phone use wasn't that prevalent, so it was a lot of landline business and emails and things like that. So it was a bit of a slow start, but eventually people got their act together, and it worked out rather well. Recovered 40% of the machine, and that's pretty good in these conditions.
Yeah, beginning the first week that I spent there at Barksdale, was trying to teach the folks how to go about picking up wreckage and how to document it. and trying to get GPS positions on all the different pieces. And it was very slow going. The KSC part of the investigation didn't begin for about a week, and it's when I got the call there in Louisiana, and they said, now you need to go to KSC and try and set up the reconstruction. So, you know, went out there, and then even getting the reconstruction going, I was working with engineers from Boeing, and then being second guessed by all the different NASA centers as to what we were going to do at KSC.
Yes, I saw a wiring diagram, an organizational chart, and we were on a dotted line out there, so we really had no true authority to do anything, and that's the way we wanted it, frankly. We were very happy to assist, but because we weren't in charge, we certainly didn't want to sign any paperwork or anything like that. But the coordination evolved, I think. Everybody was worried at first about tons and tons of parts coming into KSC, and frankly, because of the pace of the recovery effort, that really didn't work out that way. We ended up having a schedule, 2 trucks a week, remember that?
Yep.
And that worked out fine. It brought back shades of TWA 800, where the fact that all the wreckage was on the bottom of the ocean slowed things down in a good way, because if all that came in at once, it would just overwhelm you guys that were putting the thing back together.
Right. Right. One of the things I remember from being out at Barksdale was the initial stages of the investigation. Many of the parts were visited 4 and 5 times before they were ever picked up, and so there was you know this slow going to begin with. You had you know, a call from a citizen that said, "Hey, I think I have some debris." A NASA person would go out there and say, "Yep, that's from the Columbia," and then they would have a decontamination person go out there and check it to make sure that it could be picked up. Then they would have somebody go out and take the GPS position of it, and then finally, the 4th or 5th time, somebody would actually pick up the piece of wreckage and bring it back to the staging areas we had.
Yeah, the search effort was interesting to say the least. There were a zillion refrigerators that were identified as shuttle parts by citizens, all kinds of stuff out there that had nothing to do with the event, but everybody had to go out and look at them, and that it was a thorough way of doing it, but it was pretty slow. There are quite a few lessons that could be learned from the Columbia recovery effort. There's always a tendency for people to run around like chickens with their heads cut off, and it happened. Unfortunately, there was a tragic helicopter accident that occurred during the recovery effort. Maybe because people were pressing too hard, who knows? It's been a long time, but you can't bring the astronauts back to life. There's really no reason for anybody else to get hurt during a recovery effort. And people were getting injured in minor ways, tramping through bushes and jumping out of the way of rattlesnakes and all this business. But there's really no need for that. And perhaps too many people were involved. There were a lot of parts to be found, and it was a lot of an area, but the center down there, for instance, where was it, Lufkin, Texas?
That was one of them.
had hundreds of people in it, milling around doing things that, I wasn't really sure what they were doing. Examining parts perhaps, or organizing search parties or whatever, but there were a lot of folks, and perhaps if in the future a plan can be devised where you have a certain number of people at the center of the scatter pattern, if you will, to coordinate this, and then lesser people, perhaps from NASA even, out in the weeds picking up parts. You don't need an engineer to pick up a part. Nowadays, you don't even need a person to examine it personally. You can photograph it and send it back on your iPhone, and a person knowledgeable can look at it and say, nope, we don't need that, or yes, we do. So I think next time you could probably do it with a few less folks, and of course a plan, a pre-accident plan for something like this, of course, would be good.
Yeah, I think the planning is the key, is trying to come up with a way of of doing the recovery effort. There was so much wasted time, wasted energy that was spent during the recovery effort, simply because there was no plan in place. The other thing is NASA had incredible resources at their disposal. It didn't matter what you needed, you could get it on a moment's notice. I remember was working with Dom Gorey, one of the astronauts, and working with him on recovery when he said, hey, let's go grab a helicopter and we'll go search for parts. And we walked out to the ramp, got into a helicopter, and within 5 minutes we're flying over the countryside in a Black Hawk. And it made the job easier. We could fly over the countryside and look for the large parts.
Yeah. Well, that's what we did in Lockerbie. It was I forget exactly, but it was 80 or 90 mile wide scatter pattern, so you had to have helicopters. I think they used even some Air Force reconnaissance planes for Columbia, and that was of lesser use, I guess, because they were going too fast to really find small parts. But it was an all-out effort. But again, a plan is in order, I think, for the next one.
The Columbia accident was very unique and very different from an airplane accident. Almost the whole country had grown up watching these shuttles. I know I saw the first shuttle launch back in the 80s, and so I think everybody was connected to the shuttle, and they wanted to help, and there was this huge outpouring of national pride, maybe, that, hey, I can go out there and I can help figure this thing out.
I think you're right. In fact, we turned our own people away. We had almost every single aviation person in the safety board wanted to help. They were very, very disappointed when we had to send them home from Texas, and because the search effort was winding down and things like this. It's almost like the home front in World War II. It was a national tragedy, I suppose, so it's hard to fault folks for wanting to help out. Regarding the reconstruction itself, this really wasn't the first time that the NTSB has been involved. When Challenger went down many years ago, we were asked to assist in this pretty much the same manner that we did in Columbia. So we had an inkling of what we were going to be up against, I guess. And we do have some experience in reconstructing airplanes. That's the reconstruction is kind of a wrong term. It's actually a layout of parts. We can do it in 2 dimensions. And by the way, in airplane accidents, we rarely do this. Perhaps 1 in 10, we find it necessary to lay out the entire aircraft or build it up in 3 dimensions. But you can do it in 2. And I think my partner here is the one that pretty much honchoed that activity down there at KSC. And it turned out pretty well. He can tell you a little bit about why he laid it out in banana fashion versus a build-up.
Yeah, the reconstruction effort began there at KSC. And when we started it, we really had no inkling as to the cause of the accident. There was still no preliminary information. We didn't have a flight data recorder to give us an idea of where to look. So we decided, well, first of all, we're going to reconstruct it, or we're going to lay it out. And our first thought was to do a 2D layout, but we needed a facility big enough. Fortunately, there at KSC, they had an empty hangar that was almost the perfect size for laying out the shuttle. Mm-hmm. So all the decisions were made, and we elected to kind of peel open the shuttle and lay it out so that you could see the outer surface, because we felt that was the key as it was re-entering and all the heat was coming in from the outside. We thought that would give us the best opportunity to figure out what was going on. And the reason we do that 2D layout is to let the debris and let the parts talk to us and let us see what's going on and what they tell us about how the airplane or the shuttle came apart.
But you had to go 3D eventually for parts, for certain parts, right?
Eventually we decided that when we started focusing in on that left wing leading edge area, the best way to visualize that for the public and for just the little parts that we had was to develop a three-dimensional capability. And so we had some NASA engineers develop and manufacture these fixtures that were shaped like the leading edge that we could install the parts in. And that really allowed us to look at the failure area and see where the heat got into the structure and where it started causing problems.
Yeah, I was particularly impressed by the those structures, those aluminum and Lexan structures you guys devised. You could actually once the parts were installed on these devices, you could actually rotate them, so you could look down inside them or around, and they would rotate on spindles. And I thought that was pretty ingenious. One thing that impressed me about the entire operation, you had resources that you could use at will to build things like this, and on our accident sites, we rarely have that opportunity.
And one of the other keys, I guess, to doing the wreckage layout, the 2D wreckage layout, is when we do that, we expand the dimensions. We lay it out in like 110% scale, because then you're able to walk amongst the parts and see what the failures are, and see where the cracks are, and see where the breaks are. And then just the volume of parts that we ended up getting in the end was incredible. I didn't think there was going to be that much recovered. Like you said earlier, about 40% by weight of the vehicle was recovered, and to see it all laid out on the floor was quite impressive at the end of our stint.
And the evidence itself was surprising to me in several ways. That some of the debris came back virtually intact. You could almost put it back on a shuttle. Remember those gaseous hydrogen tanks, maybe?
Yes.
They were shinier than heck and stacked up there in a row, and you could have put them right back on a machine, I think. But then other parts were melted, and you don't have that in airplane accidents very often, that's for sure.
Yeah, we rarely see the kind of heat that the shuttle saw on reentry, and the melting of all the different parts, not just aluminum parts, but the steel parts and the Inconel parts, just had incredible heat signatures that we don't see with airplane accidents.
No, it was a learning experience for us too. So.
And regarding the things, some of the stuff that you see that is maybe doesn't look like it was involved in an accident. I can remember being out in the field in Texas and coming upon a manual sitting there in the field, and it was about 100 pages of a manual, a 3-ring binder, but the binder was missing, and it was just the pages stacked perfectly in the field, untouched, unburned, and it was the manual from the shuttle.
And when did you start to think, or did you ever think that we were going to over-investigate a bit, over-investigate? Did we need to lay out the whole thing?
Initially, I think we did. Initially, because we had no clue what was going on and we didn't have any information since the telemetry data went down during the reentry, we didn't have that information. I think one of the key aspects that came in was that, I think it was the MADS recorder that had, because the Columbia was the first vehicle, it had all these sensors in this data gathering system. And when we found that and it had good data on it, man, that gave us a lot of good information.
One of the basic tenets or paradigms, if you will, for NTSB work on airplane accidents is to try to avoid, to the maximum extent possible, speculation early in an investigation. In a perfect world, it's best to gather your facts, and when you're finished gathering your facts, then go ahead and begin to analyze, to begin to speculate, if you will, about what the facts mean. NASA wasn't used to tragedies like this, so in my memory, there was a lot of speculation going on very early. One thing I do remember was that there were, a lot of folks thought that something was wrong in the wheel well of the left wing because of some early indications or guesses, if you will. That was later proved wrong by the recovery of the equivalent of a flight data recorder on the machine. So it's human nature to speculate, but if you can avoid it to the maximum extent possible, I think that enhances an investigation. It frankly speeds it up sometimes.
The speculation, you know, I don't think we can help it. We all tend to speculate. But at the NTSB, we know that and we keep it in check. And most of our speculation is spent utilizing the facts that we know and basing our speculation on that fact. Early on, there was little tiny bits of data or pieces of information that came in that would lead the speculation to some areas that in the end turned out to have nothing to do with the accident. So yeah, I think there was a lot of time that was wasted on some of that speculation. Although we tried to keep reminding the folks at NASA that we were working out that, hey, let's not speculate, let's let the debris tell the story, let's figure out what the facts of the investigation are, and then the facts will lead to the analysis. The reconstruction effort began almost immediately. Within a week of the accident, NASA had decided that, yes, we do want to reconstruct this. And at that point, it was a very good idea because we had no clue as to what was going on with the vehicle. So we were probably a month in to the reconstruction effort when the MADS recorder was found, which showed some of the sensors in the wing and started to point to that left wing area. I think the reconstruction effort in the left wing area proved to be very valuable because it verified what we were seeing on the recorder. It verified the data that, yes, something was going on there. And we actually found the pieces that surrounded the hole that was in the left wing, and you could see the melting of the Inconel brackets, and you could see the burning and the charring of the RCC. It really, I think, kind of put closure to the whole investigation.
It's always an interesting question. Let me play the devil's advocate here for a second. If you would have found the recorder on the first day, downloaded it on the second day, then how would that have affected the reconstruction? And my contention is you would have emphasized the left wing. And it all goes, I guess, to efficiency of an investigation. You can be inefficient but popular with the news people, or you can be very efficient and find an answer perhaps a little bit quicker. And on the other hand, if the recorder had burned up in re-entry, then how long would it have taken you to come to the same conclusion? Or could you have come to the same conclusion?
Yeah, I think the recorder allowed us to kind of focus our effort in one area. And so it allowed us to kind of put some areas on the back burner. Some of the rest of the orbiter we put on the back burner. So the reconstruction effort, once we found the recorder, was more focused on that left wing area. If we hadn't have found it, probably would have taken us a little bit longer to figure out what was going on in the left wing. But the debris did tell the story, and you know, we formed that group, the debris analysis working group, to try and look at the debris in the absence of every other piece of information and see what it told us.
Yeah.
And that led us to the same conclusions that were made using all the data.
I think that's a key. A flight recorder or a what's called MADS recorder, they're valuable, but a lot of times they're adjunct to the rest of the investigation. If it's like a reporter doing a story, you need to fact check. The recorder can tell you one thing, and you better be able to back it up with physical evidence or something's wrong. You have to, in the end, make sure that all your ducks are in a row. All the recorder and the evidence, the physical evidence, tell you the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that comes directly from the way we investigate an accident. Many times we find the recorder as the first piece of debris, and we download that immediately. We figure out what's going on. But we do not stop the investigation there. We continue on to make sure that we can close every door, to make sure that we can verify everything that's going on that recorder.
Yeah.
The shuttle investigation kind of revealed in their plan that they were only thinking about a certain few types of accidents prior to this accident. There was, industrial accidents that they had planned for. There was launch accidents, and I think that stemmed from the Challenger. They had a launch accident, so they knew how to plan for that after seeing that. I don't think they ever realized or thought about what would happen if it was a re-entry accident, especially at the altitudes that the shuttle was at when it broke up, because it it scattered that debris over such a wide area, and it made things way more difficult. I think the planning, NASA really has to think about all possible types of accidents, not just one specific type.
I can't agree more, Clint. It was a bit surprising. You'd look at 10 years ago, you'd look at their plan, and you could tell that it was made for hangar fire or something going wrong inside the VAB, or maybe even satellites that go awry. They just weren't prepped for this type of thing, and they've got some experience now. So perhaps even a separate investigation plan for a re-entry accident might be the way to go. You can get these things to be too complicated sometimes, but sometimes you have to compartmentalize things to make them effective. If we can talk a little bit about commercial space efforts. The shuttle is no longer flying, so NASA for quite a while is going to be relying on commercial vehicles to man the ISS and to do other NASA type things. My fear, of course, is a commercial space launch accident early in this program. There's programs out, or there's plans out there for passenger carrying suborbital flights pretty soon here. Flights to the ISS with NASA astronauts as passengers. I hope everybody's thought about how quickly the entire process can come to a halt if on one of these early flights, be it with NASA people on board or paying passengers, if an early flight crashes and kills everybody. That's going to put the brakes on things for quite a while. Perhaps later on it'll be a little easier to take, perhaps. I know that sounds wrong, but I'm really a little bit afraid of an early accident here that's going to put things to bed for quite a while. Now, to prevent that, I think NASA, of course, and they're doing this, needs to be absolutely sure that the vehicles that they use for commercial use are up to snuff. And I don't mean to denigrate any company or anything like that, but to me that's very important. In our world, the NTSB, we have MOUs with the FAA, who will even license the NASA-related flights. We have MOUs with the Air Force concerning who's in charge and what happens when an event occurs. We don't have an MOU yet with NASA, which I think probably would be a very good idea. I think it's on our books, our to-do list, if you will. But the MOUs are a little hard to get everybody to sign off on to begin with. So the quicker some firm agreement, it doesn't have to be a long one, a firm agreement with NASA and the NTSB, the quicker that can be promulgated, the better. As it stands now, if a commercial space launch accident occurs, we're in charge, and that may not be the best way to go. I don't know. It's none of my business really, but at least a plan has to be in place real soon.
The safety board is a reactionary agency. We only get called when bad things happen, and we're not out there trying to be proactive and keep accidents from happening, other than by investigating an accident. So when it comes to commercial space that's coming online, I know we're working very closely with the FAA and trying to understand that industry and to understand what our roles would be in an accident investigation. We've got folks in some of our regional offices that are visiting and meeting with the folks down in New Mexico where the commercial space hub, I guess, is going to be. So we're getting involved, and we're trying to be a little bit more proactive, but it's all going to depend on how quickly this new business model emerges, and frankly, are people going to be willing to pay to go into space? I think so, and when you start doing that, I think it's almost inevitable that we're going to have an accident. And so we're going to have to go out there and investigate it. The shuttle, I think, gave us a lot of good information about reentry, and if something does break up on reentry, there was a lot of great information in the debris that we looked at during the shuttle investigation and how it performed, different shapes, and which shapes performed better than others, what materials performed better than others. I think that's going to be invaluable when it comes to a commercial space launch accident.
The fact that the first commercial space launch accident that kills people, it's not going to be John and Mary out in the middle of a cornfield somewhere. It's going to be either very, very rich American citizens or very, very valuable astronauts who are national treasures. And that's going to make a huge difference in how it affects the commercial space launch industry. And frankly, we're having, well, I'm retired now, but when I left, we were having trouble convincing our own people to send us to schools on the basic orbital mechanics, the things you need, launch procedures, things like that, because we're an airplane group. We investigate airplane accidents, so at least I was having a little trouble convincing the bosses that commercial space is on its way, but in a few years it will be.
Yeah, and I think the pendulum is starting to swing back the other way with some kind of changes in administration at our agency. We're starting to see more of that. We're starting to get more involved and starting to go to more conferences, learn more about this whole commercial space venture and what our role is going to be when an accident happens.
Lastly, I guess, it certainly would behoove NASA to have, again, a plan for this, be it a launch accident, re-entry accident, any type of an event that approaches the scale of Columbia. And in the last 10 years, I'm sure NASA has done this, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to dust that plan off and tailor it to commercial space launch accidents.
The three most important things that I could tell a NASA investigator if they were going to investigate a similar accident is to go in, one, with an open mind, to try not to speculate, to try and let the debris and let the circumstances tell the story, and to be very thorough in how you look at everything, not only the data, but the debris, and every little bit, every little piece of information you have to look at. Kind of go through it with a fine-tooth comb in order to kind of ferret out all the little issues that can be there.
If I had to pick three, I think I'd agree, of course, with the concept of not speculating until you sit down and begin to analyze the facts. Again, I'd reemphasize the danger of rushing around like a chicken with your head cut off as soon as an accident occurs. A good plan would prevent that, a lot of that type of thing. And thirdly, I just, again, have to agree with the no stone unturned concept. You'll be faced with a lot of red herrings that won't mean a darn thing, but by gosh, you gotta track them down. You gotta turn over every single rock to make sure you haven't missed something. And if I had a personal takeaway from the entire effort, I'd almost have to wax philosophical. It was a tragically historic event. I was honored to be a very, very small part of it. It's something I'll never forget in my life, and I just hope that the NTSB was able to contribute just a little bit to make it a successful investigation.
It was a tremendous experience. I was tremendously proud to be able to help NASA in this horrible situation, and it really gave me some absolutely wonderful memories. And I made some really good friends with the folks that we ended up working with down at KSC.